Morning, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the May 19th, 2021 meeting of the Audit and Finance Standing Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order. The time is now 10:03. As is traditional in these Zoom times, I would like to run through each of the councillors and make sure that we have a good audio-video signal coming from each of them. So let's start with District 1 and Councillor Daigle-Gammon. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. District 1 here in Fall River, representing Waverly, Fall River, Muscatawbet Valley, and the sun is shining on both sides of the room today.
That's awesome. Good morning. Councillor Hensby, District 2.
Well, good morning all, and the dandelions are getting taller.
They are, and please remember no mow May. Councillor Purdy, District 4.
Good morning, everyone. I also am helping to pollinate the bees with dandelions. They're actually quite beautiful. So happy to be here and lovely to see the sun.
Absolutely. Good morning. Councillor Cleary, District 9.
Well, in addition to the dandelions that are growing, which are awesome in salads and of course for wine, I'm in desperate need of a haircut. So I'm looking forward to the lockdown ending at some point in the next number of weeks. Or I might have to start doing a ponytail. Yes, thank you. Happy to be here. Let's get going.
Absolutely. Councillor Morris, District 10.
Good morning, everyone. I've got my pickleball background on this morning, and you're all welcome to come out. There's an underused pickleball court in my district, so you're all welcome.
That's surprising. Mayor Savage.
Good morning, Chair and colleagues. I am getting rid of my dandelions. I have an informal agreement with my neighbor, who's also my member of parliament, that he takes care of the bees. I take care of my lawn, and I'm with Councillor Cleary on the hair thing. I may not look it, but I'm about to go down to Monty's and be part of the ZZ Top cover band when they come by next time. So I want a haircut.
Hopefully we will be able to get that done. Maybe
More Bill Cream.
A group haircut for everybody in council.
More Bill Cream.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just to say, our mayor looks a heck of a lot better than Toronto's mayor in his hair. So nice on you, Mike.
I want to tell you, I spoke to John Tory yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I said, your hair looks about as much in control as the federal deficit. He laughed about that.
That would be a conversation with your neighbor too. Now I'd like to jump over to our Auditor General, Evangeline Coleman-Sad, and just make sure that your audio and video are working as well.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning. And finally, our lawyer, John Traves.
Morning, all.
Good stuff. Thank you. Now that we have passed that, the approval of the minutes of April 29th, 2021.
So moved, Councillor Cleary.
Councillor Cleary, seconded by Councillor Hensby. Thank you very much. Are there any errors or omissions in the minutes of April 29th, 2021? Seeing none, all in favor of the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Great, thank you. Those minutes pass. On to the approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Over to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have received no additions and I've received no information from members around items to be deleted.
Okay, thank you. And to the committee.
I'll move the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder for that?
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Daigle-Gammon. Are there any changes to the order of business? Seeing none, all in favor of the order of business as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Great, thank you very much. Business arising out of the minutes is none. Call for declaration of conflicts of interest. Not seeing any. Motions of reconsideration is none. Motions of rescission is none. Consideration of deferred business is none. Notices of tabled matters is none. Correspondence, over to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and no correspondence has been received for this meeting.
Okay, thank you. And any petitions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and no petitions received by the clerk's office.
Wonderful, thank you. No presentations, no information items brought forward. So we're on to item 12.1.1. This is the annual audit priorities report by our Auditor General, Evangeline Coleman-Sod. You have the floor.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to start out by attempting to share my screen with you so that you can see my presentation. Okay. So I'm assuming everybody can now see that. Good morning. It's good to be here today to present my annual report and audit priorities to you. As we all know, 2021 was an unusual year with some unique challenges. We had a vacancy for 10 months of the year and a maternity leave for part of the year that we didn't backfill. And that was all as part of savings after COVID hit Nova Scotia. So both of those vacancies had an impact on the amount of audit work that we could get done in the year. We started out, as everyone else did, working 2020-21, working from home and trying to figure out how to complete our audits while doing that. Some of the information for our audits was in paper format only, and I really have to give a shout out here to my staff and to staff and management of the HRM business units that we were dealing with at the time, who collaborated to find ways to for us to get access to those paper files, despite the fact that everybody was working from home. So we really appreciated that. We released 2 audit reports during the year, and that seems like a small number, but we had 2 additional reports that sort of just missed the year-end cutoff and were issued in April of 2021. But the work for those, of course, would have been completed in 2020-21. And the Halifax Regional Police IT audit was a large one for us, and it took longer than a different audit that wasn't a large IT audit might have taken. We also released 2 follow-up reports of 4 audits from 2018 and 2019. We released procurement, management of development approvals, Halifax Transit bus maintenance, and property tax management follow-ups. Audits in progress at this time, we're looking at management of the fire inspection program. And we have follow-up reviews for 3 previous audits that are going on at the moment: payroll management, purchasing card program, and road and sidewalk asset management. Typically, this report includes our strategic goals, and this year's includes that as well, and is sort of a wrap-up of those goals. So over the past 3 years, we had a number of goals that were related to 4 areas: action taken as a result of our work, improving understandability of our work, enhancing readability of our reports, and expanding our use of data analytics. So we worked on all of those goals over the past few years and completed all but one. And for that one goal, we did do some work on it, but we ultimately decided not to implement it. The goal was essentially to explore continuous auditing, and we ultimately decided not to implement that. Over the course of this year, we will work to refresh our strategic goals and plan initiatives to achieve those goals that we will pick throughout 2024-25. The presentation has some performance information, which is also in the annual report. We report 3 measures publicly to speak to how we're doing in terms of achieving our performance measures and meeting those targets. I'm happy to say we met or exceeded all targets. So I'll walk you through each one of them. The percentage of staff hours spent on audit versus non-audit activities, and of course non-audit activities include, things like vacation and so on even. And we achieve that particular target by ensuring that we schedule our audits just in a way that maximizes the time staff spend on them and reduces any downtime between audits. So trying to plan so that things are getting going before another one really wraps up, so that there's limited or no downtime in between. The percentage of recommendations accepted and plan to implement, that one is at 100%, which is the target. And that might seem high, but really that has to do with us working with HRM management to achieve that percentage. We talk about the draft recommendations and try to refine the wording to address any concerns that management has, to try to get to a place where management are confident that they can implement the recommendations. So that one's really a collaborative effort. And then finally, the percentage of recommendations implemented after 18 months, the target for that is 80%. And over the past year, we were at 89. That one's a little more out of our control and more in the control of HRM management. The work that we do before we release the reports with management to try to get to 100% on the number of recommendations accepted is really what helps to drive a high implementation rate, I think. And so our success in that area and HRM management's success in that area is reflected in that 89% implementation rate. This slide has my, excuse me, 21-22 audit priorities. So there's always some overlap from year to year in terms of when audits start and when they get released. So we started working on an audit of management of fire inspection program during 2021, and that will be reported sometime in 2021. We're also working on follow-up of 3 audits from 2019 at the moment that I expect will be released in June. So our new audits for 21-22 are real estate, solid waste, managing workplace behavior complaints, and 2 IT audits, one at Halifax Water and one of HRM IT. So as you're likely aware, I asked for additional funding for 21-22 to contract some IT audit expertise. And the plan for that is to assist with the Halifax Water audit. I'm hoping that this will help us create a bit of a roadmap for future IT audits. It doesn't mean that we might not still need some expertise from time to time, but we want to develop our own processes to be as efficient and effective as they can be when we're undertaking IT audits. So I'll admit having 2 IT audits in the plan is ambitious, but the intent is to complete and report Halifax Water in 21-22 and then start the HRM IT audit, but I do not expect that to be reported in this current fiscal year. I expect it to be reported in 22-23. And as you know, we follow up our audit recommendations after roughly 18 months. So there were a number of audits for follow-up in 21-22. I mentioned 3 earlier: payroll management, purchasing card program, and road and sidewalk asset management. And those will be released likely next month. And then later in the year, we will follow up LED streetlight conversion project, HRM's new website project, and fleet vehicle use, car allowance, and mileage audit. So that is really it for my presentation. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Super. Thank you very much. For any members of the Audit and Finance Standing Committee, please indicate in the chat if you have any questions. Councillor Hensby, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. There's a few things in the report that could have caught my eye. I was kind of wondering the status of them. You talked about the property tax management and stuff. I'm still concerned about the number of owner unknown and some of our accounts that don't have assessment account numbers associated with them. I think that there's been a recent news story in Richmond County talking about how many properties were not getting property tax bills and stuff. So I don't know if we ever done an audit of our tax roll data in regards to how much is missing information in regards to getting tax bills. The other thing was about your sidewalk and street asset management. You're probably aware that next year we'll be taking over the roads at East Preston, Lake Echo, Mineville, and well as most of Lawrencetown, including your street, Madam Auditor General. So I wasn't sure if you're participating in a bit of that asset review of what we're getting from the province, because I think we're going to have a deficit situation when it comes to the asphalt conditions and stuff. So I don't know what kind of monetary write-off is going to be with that type of asset coming to us as well. And street lighting, I'm always been a concern about our street lights in regards to the Nova Scotia power inventory. We've had discussions in the past about, we took over all the streets lights on public roadways, but in the past we used to have community area rates. We also had street lighting on private lanes as well, and these private lanes are still being serviced by garbage trucks and everything else like that, and their streetlights had not been transferred over yet. They were put in by the local area rates at the time. Then we took out the area rates, and now we took over ownership, but we did not take ownership of all the lights yet. So I'm kind of curious about those ones that are what I call the gray zone of what's going to happen with those. And my last comment, when it comes to real estate, I find when our parkland acquisition requests are at the bottom of the pile, and everything else goes first in regards to real estate. I understand real estate in regards to industrial parks. I can understand that's the money maker and stuff, but sometimes I find that some of those nice community projects don't get the priority. So I'd like to know how we can probably elevate that. Thank you.
So even though that covered a wide swath, I would assume that you're working with the respective departments to get the answers to most of those questions, and would look to the Auditor General to see how she can respond in her role on each of those items.
I have had my dialogue with staff about these matters, and I just want to make sure that there's a second set of eyes from the Auditor General, maybe peering over them soon.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so you covered a lot in that, Councillor. So if I miss anything in my response, please let me know. So I'll try to start from the top. In terms of the property tax management, when we did that audit, we were looking at how the property tax processes are managed to ensure compliance with legislation, policies, and guidelines, and the tax collection process. Looking at how, I guess, how whether or not the property tax rolls are entirely accurate would be I think, very challenging. You'd have to compare it to a lot of GIS data and so on. So we would have been looking at the information that existed in the rolls. We might have done a little bit of work trying to figure out if there were any gaps in it, but that certainly wouldn't have been the focus of that audit. Sidewalk asset management, that's a follow-up that we're doing. So we did that audit previously. We will be following it up this year. We wouldn't be part of reviewing the assets that HRM gets from the province of Nova Scotia. That would be part of management's role. You had a question about streetlights. I will confess I was making a note about your question about sidewalk and asset management, and I'm not sure what your streetlight question was. So perhaps you can refresh my memory on that one.
Yeah, the streetlight inventory, they've gone through and they did a full inventory of all the streetlights across the municipality, and we took over the ones on public roadways. So there's still an inventory of lights that are on private lanes, as well as some other lights that are out there. They're even on HRM property, but we still got the old high pressure sodium bulbs there. They haven't replaced them over. So there's a gray zone of lights out there that they have not reconciled yet with Nova Scotia Power. And a lot of those lights, you probably will find there's no personal power bill they're being associated with. So they were all in the past probably paid for by an area rate, or they can't find a billing account for those lights that are there. So.
Yeah, so I think that one is really a staff matter to deal with when we LED conversion project and how that was managed. So that one's probably a question for staff. And you also had a question in terms of the communities. And sorry, towards the end there, I was making notes and I missed your last couple, I think.
It was just a real estate comment in regards to, it seems like our community parkland requests are at the bottom of the priority list in regards to real estate matters. And I just find it frustrating. That's how long it might take to get some of those files resolved.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just say this, in terms of real estate or any other audit that we have listed, part of the purpose of sharing this is so that councillors are aware of what our upcoming audits are. If you have any concerns that relate to those areas, please feel free to reach out. We can have a phone call, video chat, send an email, whichever you prefer. that's really a useful way for us to get some additional information on where some risk areas might be. We always talk to management about the particular area that we're auditing, but if you as councillors have information, that's helpful as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see anybody else in the chat who indicates that they have a question, so I have a couple. One of them is on one of your presentation, or on one of the slides, you made reference to the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation and training that was provided in 2019. This is something that I had previously mentioned to you, but that was prior to a 50% turnover of council and effectively 100% turnover of the Audit and Finance Committee. And I'm just wondering if you could provide some details on that training and an opinion on whether or not it would make sense to redo that, at least for this committee and potentially for all of council.
Sure. So full disclosure, I will, and I know you're aware of this, Councillor Russell, already, because I've let you know, I chair the board of the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation. And the board certainly has a lot of auditors from around the country, from various Auditor General offices on that board. The training is excellent. It started out as training for public accounts committees in provincial and federal legislatures. And really the Audit and Finance Committee training grew out of that. Ours in 2019 was actually a pilot project. So we agreed to be part of a pilot for CAAF in terms of that training. And in exchange, we actually didn't have to pay anything for that training at the time, where they came and they basically ran their pilot course, looked for some feedback, what areas should they make updates to and so on. And the course was really based on that Public Accounts Committee course and then some modifications to make it fit the municipal world. So in terms of the training, I believe it's very useful for any elected official, not just Audit and Finance Standing Committee, which is why when the training was done in 2019, it was available to other councillors as well. And I believe a couple of the councillors on the call may have participated in it. Councillor Cleary and I believe Councillor Hensby were both there. So it really, it sort of delves into what your role as an elected official, what your role in terms of accountability, talks about effective questioning, how to make sure your questions are effective, how to continue to probe if you haven't gotten an answer, if you've gotten just a lot of information, but maybe not an answer. And it also talks about how to deal with Office of the Auditor General reports, how to deal with the recommendations from them, talks about some best practices, which would involve getting action plans from management that lay out how management intends to address the recommendations and when. So it is very useful training. As I said, in 2019, it was part of a pilot, so there was no cost. If the training were undertaken today, there would be a cost associated with it, although it's certainly a reasonable cost. And it's something that my office could easily coordinate through the council support office looking into if you wanted to in terms of timing. Most things, of course, now are being done virtually, but it is a really useful course. So I hope that helps.
That does help. I would hope that there is some movement forward on this. It sounds like it would be beneficial for a lot of us. My second question relates to the accepted recommendations. Having a target of 100% of accepted recommendations is great. Some of them are sure to be difficult, contentious, challenging, and some of the managers and some of the business units might exert a lot of pushback. What happens if we don't get to 100% of achieved target recommendations or of accepted recommendations?
Yep, that's a great question. So we do work very hard to try to get to that goal. And part of that has to do with just sometimes how things are phrased. So we may write a recommendation and to us, it means something, but when we discuss it with management, they think it means something very different. And so we'll work on the language. We're all essentially talking about the same thing. What they're saying they think they can do in the area might be what we're trying to recommend. Maybe they just don't read the language that way. So in those cases, it's simply a matter of working on the language. Sometimes there's a bit of an education process on both sides. What is practical and reasonable for management. what are good controls and policies and so on to have in place in terms of us talking with management. At the end of the day, we've been lucky so far. We've been able to get to 100%. I've no doubt there will come a time when we won't. And basically at that point, the decision is up to myself really as Auditor General and in consultation with the audit team to decide if we feel that that is a high risk recommendation and something important that needs to be said. And in that instance, we would go ahead, make the recommendation. Management, I presume in their response would indicate they didn't intend to implement it. And I think then that's when Audit and Finance Standing Committee and perhaps even Regional Council comes into play in terms of what are your thoughts from holding management accountable for the effective management of programs? Is that an important recommendation? Does it seem like an area that should be addressed? And then whatever falls out of that process.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Eventually, when it comes to sort of non-HRM committees, like sort of the commissions, so where it's the Water Commission, and if there's a recommendation that could be challenging to implement, is there any distinction between it being a commission as opposed to a business unit or a division of HRM that is different than commissions?
That's an interesting question. So for purposes of my ability to do the work, no.
Okay.
For purposes of Audit and Finance Standing Committee, Regional Council's ability to exert influence on whether or not a recommendation gets completed, maybe. However, in the case of, I'll use Halifax Water as an example, Halifax Water has a board. And so I would, in that instance, be looking to that group as well as presenting to Audit and Finance Standing Committee at the end of the day on the results of any report on Halifax Water. And so I would be looking to that group as a governance group to be holding management accountable as well. So I think there'd be a role there for the commission to play.
Thank you. And then just a follow-up to that, where I am on the Water Commission, the audit report is presented at Audit and Finance. So is my role then one of being in conflict if you're a commissioner and then getting the report here?
I don't think so. So when we have an instance like this, what we would typically do is we would present to the commission generally first. So our process always involves providing a draft report to management, talking about it with management, and then ultimately it gets finalized. We get recommendation responses and we present, or I present to Audit and Finance Standing Committee with my staff. In the case of an organization that has an external board or commission, or even if it was all internal, even if it was all councillors, we would present to that group. Hopefully first is the goal. That's what we're trying to get to so that we have their input by the time we get to this forum. So I don't think you'd be in conflict if things were discussed in camera at the commission, then obviously there'd be an issue in terms of sharing that information, but that would be no different than, say, myself. If I'd attended the in-camera portion, discussed the audit in any manner, I wouldn't be sharing that when I came here necessarily.
Great, thank you. And I have just one more left. There, some of the follow-ups, we can just go back to find, so as new to Audit and Finance. Some of the follow-ups, the original report, we can just go back and read them so that we would understand the follow-up, right?
You can. They're all on my office's website. And if you like, I can have my admin person send all councillors just a link to where the follow-up piece from my website is. And you'll just see a list on there of the follow-ups that have been completed to date. And I'll get her to include a list of the reports as well, or sorry, a link to where the reports are. So the follow-ups are on one tab, the reports are on another, and you just be able to go through then and see where the audit reports were and read them as you wished.
Oh, great. A quick list of my homework. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the never-ending homework. I had a question about the follow-ups. Actually, you may have already answered this, but in your 18-month follow-up for recommendations, if there's a recommendation that hasn't been addressed or done, what's the protocol for that? And also, is there a report on the follow-up? So like, would a report come back to, say, Audit and Finance as to whether all of those recommendations were implemented?
Sure. So if a rec hasn't been addressed, it would get, so there is a report. Maybe I'll start with that. There is a report that gets published that goes to Audit and Finance Standing Committee, and you'll see one next month on the 3 that are just wrapping up now. The report is a review and not an audit. And that's a distinction that's really important to auditors and probably not to anybody else, but I'll explain what it is nevertheless. An audit basically involves a much higher bar in terms of the level of work that you do. A review is based more on reasonability of what management is telling you. We do a small amount of work to confirm what management tells us, but nowhere near the level that we would do on an audit. So for example, we might look at a couple of files as opposed to we might look at 30 or 50 on an audit. So it's just a lower level of assurance. And we do that because with the size of our office, it would be really hard to get the new audits done. And even the big offices around the country, the vast majority of Auditor General offices do follow up as a review and not as an audit. Eventually, they may come around to the topic on their audit list again and do it. And if a recommendation hasn't been addressed, it will be reflected in that report. And so obviously 89%, there are some that haven't been addressed, but not a large number. In terms of what happens, I do intend to follow up those old recommendations at some point, likely in the next 12 to 18 months. We will go back, look at the recommendations over the past few years since we put a follow-up process in place, and say, okay, these are the ones that have been implemented. Where are they now? And follow those up and produce a report on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Savage.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Evangelina. I would hope people who are watching would appreciate how thorough the work is that the Auditor General's office have done. I think we have the best Auditor General's office of any municipality in the country, and I would certainly say better than most provinces as well. And you know, it's always a challenge when you have an Auditor General because you know everything that comes out gets attention and people look for the negative. But there's a lot of work that Evangeline and her team have pointed out that good work is done and recognized as being done. One of the things I really like about the work that Evangeline and the team do is that when we get recommendations, even on big reports, there tend to be a fewer number of recommendations because, you know, I think it's fair to say, you know, Madam Auditor General, that you're not looking to identify all kinds of little things that might seem big to some people, but to really make a difference for the municipality. And I think that the work that you've done with our staff, not pulling punches, but you know, making sure that everything is understood and worked through has been really important for us. I want to thank you for that. And the only thing I didn't see in your presentation, I might have missed it. That's entirely possible. Do we still have the line that people can call if they have tips as to what the Auditor General might want to look at? Do we still have that?
Thank you. Sorry, I muted myself and couldn't seem to unmute myself for a moment there. So thank you for your kind comments, Mr. Mayor, to start with. Certainly, we do try to focus on the high-risk recommendations, and we also report what we find. So I don't believe in deficiency-based reporting, which is where you only report the negative. I'm a firm believer in reporting the positive and the negative. We do still have, excuse me, a function by which people can contact us and let us know if they have areas of concern. And so it is a section of our website called Audit Information, Fraud and Waste Reporting. There's a form on there that can be used. Folk can also send us an email. We don't use the specific phone line as much anymore, although you still can call a number there if you wish, but we didn't find we were getting a whole lot of information through that phone line. We'd love to see more information coming in through that hotline, if you will. Love to see some more info in terms of what people see as risk areas, in particular when we're auditing. So one of the things we'll be trying to do in the upcoming year is tweeting and making it a little more public, perhaps when we're starting audits, and maybe tweet with a link to that area of our website so that if someone has areas of concern, they can bring it to our attention in a manner that would let us take a look at it when we were auditing that area.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I think people should understand it's a credit to council that we have an Auditor General. The first one came about for a very specific reason, and then after 7 years when the contract was up, council made a conscious decision to continue with an Auditor General. And it is something that that is a mixed blessing from a municipal point of view, but at the end of the day, it makes us a better municipality. It makes us more accountable. And I think it makes our operations a whole lot better. And I expect, I'm not necessarily asking for Evangeline to validate this, but anytime that audits have come forward that I can recall, our directors and managers have been cooperative and have accepted the audits and haven't disputed them and have made improvements. And I think that all of that makes us a whole lot stronger as a municipality. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And that is true. We generally get extremely good cooperation from HRM staff and management, any of the audits that we've completed. Even when we've had some perhaps more challenging findings to hear if you're responsible for a program area. I've been impressed by management's acceptance of them and willingness to talk about it and to talk about how improvements might be made.
Thank you very much. Councillor Vogel-Gammon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And, I copied the mayor's comments about having an Auditor General of such excellence and skill. Amazing. But so that we can support and do the work better, I just wouldn't want to lose the comment, Mr. Chair, that you had made about the training with the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation. So even if there is a cost, I don't know how that works, but I would say that it would be very advantageous if we could have that training again. So I just don't want to get that lost in not have, if it needs an action item or, a motion to say that we want to have the training available to us. I think that would be awesome. So, Mr. Chair, I don't know how we need to go about that or not, but
I'm not sure either, but it will not get lost. Okay. Thank you very much. I don't see anybody else in the chat, so I do have a couple of additional questions. One of them is a little bit more clarity on the difference between a review and the initial audit. And it is my understanding that the review of the audit would encompass those things that you had found in the recommendation and would not expand beyond that. The second one is you made a comment that you look at those recommendations that were not marked as complete. Do you also look at those recommendations that have been marked as complete?
Thanks. Just gonna make a quick note here so I don't forget to answer the second part of your question. So in terms of review versus audit, so there is a difference in the level of work as I described, but you are correct that when we do the audit, whatever the audit objectives are is what we're trying to answer as we carry out that work. Out of that flow recommendations, when we do the review, we are only looking at those recommendations and we are looking at them through a lens of, I guess, less work effort than is involved in the audit to start with. So review really is about reasonability of what you're being told. Does it make sense? It does involve some checking in terms of assurance, but not the level that you would get in an audit. But yes, it is only the recommendations. And what we would do is we would send all recommendations out to management and ask them to self-assess whether they're complete or not. We get that back. If they say they're not complete, we don't really do a whole lot of work with that because they're telling us they haven't finished it. And so there's not much point to, I'm assuming they wouldn't tell us they were not done if they really were. So unless they've indicated something in the notes that seems to imply this might be done, because occasionally people misunderstand development of a policy, for example. Because policy review is an ongoing thing that you should be doing every 3 or 5 years, sometimes management will look on that as not complete. They've put a policy in place, they've implemented it, but they know they're going to review it in a few years. We would generally go back to them and say, you know, that's really complete. You're going to be reviewing your policies regularly anyway, but you've satisfied our recommendation. But generally, unless it's something like that, we don't look at the incomplete ones. We only look at the complete ones. And try to verify that they actually have been done. So we would do some measure of work on each one of those ones that management are attesting to us have been completed.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't see any further speakers in the chat. I believe we just received your report. We don't have to forward it to anyone, so I'm not sure if there's a motion required at this point. I don't see one in my notes or in the agenda. So at this point, I'd like to thank you very much, Evangeline, for your report again on the audit priorities, and wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 12.2.1 HRM supports for open street initiatives, and we have with us Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth, the floor is yours. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of council. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Andrew Cox, who is the Senior Event Coordinator and also the Chair of the Special Events Task Force. We're here to answer any questions regarding our submission of our report on HRM support for open street initiatives. Given, of course, this COVID time makes it almost unimaginable to think that we could get back to a time where we will be able to hold open street events again, albeit hopefully in the next couple of years, we will see that movement.
You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Yes, I saw that. Thank you very much, Councillor Cleary. Yes, I agree. Hopefully we will be able to get back to open street events shortly. If anybody has any questions for Elizabeth Taylor or Andrew Cox, please signify that in the chat, and go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I'm interested in this, and I know that Councillor Cleary had been part of that original motion along with Councillor Austin. So Elizabeth, it's great to see you, and Santa Cox, I guess that is, with the beard, and you're right below Hensby on my screen. You look like father and son. I don't know who the father and who the son is, but it's great to see you, Andrew. Elizabeth, my only question, look, there's some disappointments here in terms of how we deal with the province and what we're allowed and what we're not allowed to do. I'm just wondering, have we looked at, like, what are other cities doing? Are there other cities that are allowed more flexibility on these things? I think that this is really important for us. And our traffic folks have done amazing stuff over the last year, and really appreciate the work that they've done. Tanya and everybody else who's been working on that. But are other cities and municipalities, do they have a better ability to manage these things for the benefit of the community organizations who are trying to manage their costs?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Mayor. The different cities, depending obviously on their motor vehicle act, have some more leeway. Toronto, for instance, would allow traffic control persons at their open street events. Ottawa is also allows traffic control persons. However, as we're aware, and I know you wrote back in 2016 to the province asking if the Motor Vehicle Act could be amended to allow these persons. And we checked yesterday with traffic, and unfortunately there's been no movement on that request to allow traffic control persons at our events.
Yeah, it's disappointing. You know, I really like the idea of of open streets. And I think that's the right name. Some people say you close it to traffic. You really open it to people. In general, there's more that we can do, but certainly for special events and for the organizers who are trying to make things happen in our communities, I think it would be awesome if we could, wherever it is in the municipality, there's a lot of different places that we can do it. So I think we need to keep pushing on those things, and I encourage council to do that. I like Councillor Cleary put the motion on the floor. I just wanted to find out what other city, you see other, I mean, if Toronto, gosh, I mean, I've been in New York when they've shut down streets, and they got a little more traffic than we do. So I still think we're a little bit slower here in terms of wanting to offend people in cars, but that's what we're going to have to do more broadly, I think. And we need to work with the province on that. Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Andrew.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. So I'll move that the Audit and Finance Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to continue to consider the open streets events under the terms of Administrative Order Number 2014-010-ADM, respecting special events task force process for events, parades, and street closures, and Administrative Order Number 2014-021-Gov, respecting regional special events grants.
I can second that, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Daigle-Gammon, thank you very much. Go ahead, Councillor Cleary.
Thank you. And some of our new colleagues may not understand what I'm about to say, but I'm going to, as the mayor would, I'm going to try an Adam's gambit here. And so I'm going to put this motion on the floor, or I have put the motion on the floor. And thank you, Councillor Daigle-Gammon, for seconding it. But I'm going to recommend that we actually defeat it and go with alternative number 1. And so just a quick little bit of history here. So as we've been going through this, and this started before my time on council, and I know Councillor Mason and the mayor and others have been pushing this. And I think now that the Nova Scotia Department of Transportation and Active Transportation, they have a new name, and of course we have a new premier, and I'm hoping that further endeavors from the city to the new provincial government will actually pay more dividends than previous discussions have. Still the same minister, so bit of head wind there in terms of getting through. But I think based on my discussions with the new premier, we'll be able to move on some of these issues. Won't be quick, and the Traffic Safety Act, which will replace the Motor Vehicle Act, doesn't seem to be any different in this regard. However, that's still not proclaimed, and there might be a chance to change some more things in there. And the reason, so if you look through the staff report, what they're asking for, if you go through the numbers for the switch, in 2019, of course, for the Halifax and Dartmouth side, it was $21,000 in combined municipal costs. And I think Ms. Taylor indicated that for 2021, we'd be looking at around 24-ish grand. And so with a $12,000 award, it's barely paying for half of what they have to pay us. So the Motor Vehicle Act says, look, you have to have cops in order to man the barricades, as it were. And it's not, I mean, if we had a choice, we wouldn't be doing it this way. We would allow them, but the province doesn't allow us. And so for some of these busy intersections, because switch happens on busy roads where there's lots of retail, there's commercial, there's residential, there's people hanging out. And in the COVID times we're in right now, this would actually be huge. Like once these restrictions are reduced and we can actually start gathering again, our small businesses, which is what is on these streets where this switch happens, need to spill out into the road to have customers. I've been in the switch on both the Halifax and the Dartmouth side, and it's amazing to see kids doing chalk art and cycling around and scootering, and people eating souvlaki on the side of the curb. It's amazing. And so we want to actually help in this. And the interesting thing about this is we're not giving this money for them to pay for the souvlaki, to pay for the tables and tents and all that stuff. They're actually giving it back to us. So every dollar we give them of this 24 is going to come back to us, because it's going to pay the police officers who have to man. It's going to pay our traffic management staff who have to bring out the barricades and do all that sort of stuff. So what I'm going to say is, please, let's defeat the motion that's on the floor. And I appreciate the recommendation from staff, but I also appreciate the fact that they did discuss this and put the alternative in. And I still want to, in keeping with the current administrative order that we have, I think it's important to stick to that policy and not set up a new program specific to Switch. But they are the main user of money when it comes to closing our streets. And I do reflect on how many other groups, whether it's the Dr. Giacomo Antonio, who has the Heartland Tour, is constantly complaining about how much it costs and looking for alternatives. And last year they used the J.W. McLeod School, and before that they used the Oval because they wanted to avoid the street closure costs because it is expensive. But this is one of those things where in a post-COVID time, well, just post-COVID, hopefully we'll all be vaccinated with at least a first shot when this happens. We need to help out our businesses and our residents in every way possible. And this is a huge community building effort. And I know I'm probably close to my time or over it, but I thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank you, colleagues, and I thank you especially for Ms. Taylor and Mr. Cox for this. I think this is something that we can do. It's easy for us to do. It's not a huge amount of money. It has huge benefits. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So this is the suggestion or recommendation that we defeat the motion. It is not an amendment, so we are proceeding on the original list. Let's keep this in mind when we go to vote for it. Councillor Hensby, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I totally agree with Councillor Cleary in this matter. This is long overdue. Even with the new department name change of Transportation and Active Transit, I think now we have to probably push this matter even further again with the minister and the new premier as well. This is no better time than to strike when the iron is hot. We were hoping that as this pandemic subsides, that people want to get out and about more. We see it now with our trails and parks and beaches are crowded, beyond belief at times. But we need to have this capacity to have people to enjoy our streets, and the only way to do it is this open street concept. I'm a little surprised though about the policing issues, because I know when we used to have our parades in Porter's Lake and stuff, the RCMP would oversee a corps of volunteers, usually our ground search and rescue teams, that we put on vests and stuff, and they would man the gates at various intersections. So therefore, it wasn't a police officer at every checkpoint. It was a police officer overseeing a core group of volunteers that were trained in regards to traffic management. So I don't know why we can't still be doing that. And I think this is one of those issues when they want to talk about defund police. This may be one of the defunding exercises we need to get the authority to do, to have our own transportation patrol crews to do. So that's why I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Hensby. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this question might be very stupid, but when I was reading the report, I was wondering if policing services are one of the big expenses for doing this. Well, if we approve the budget, would that be something that we could negotiate into the budget, or have that as a part of the service that they provide for HRM within that current budget? And to speak to what Councillor Hensby said, RCMP, I'm pretty sure they offer their services free for community events. Like, they don't charge extra for that. So yeah, so I'm just wondering, how does that work for the budget or for negotiating a service like that within a budget?
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand that over to Elizabeth Taylor and Andrew Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as the overall budget negotiating, you're talking about the overall HRP budget. That I couldn't speak to. We know that there are unionized special amounts that police charge. We've never negotiated on those fees. I would doubt that we would. But again, that's something that I can take away and go back to you with Councillor Purdy without any problem at all. Perhaps, Andrew, can you speak to the RCMP's service, which you are correct, it is at no cost.
Yeah, the answer through the chair to the councillor is that the RCMP and the Halifax Regional Police fall into two different jurisdictions. As Elizabeth just indicated, the Halifax Regional Police are unionized workers, and when they're doing the work for special events, it's outside of the regular duty. So it becomes part of an overtime call out for most times that the police are required for special events, and most special events are held on evenings and weekends and can't take advantage of existing municipal services costs being streamed to regular duty. The jurisdiction of the RCMP is that under federal legislation, they're not permitted to charge for overtime. So they have to, when they are able, provide the service of free in the jurisdiction which the RCMP cover, which are for areas outside of what we all traditionally would see as, Halifax, Dartmouth, Bedford. And in certain places, there's a little overlap in certain places close to Sackville. But most of the RCMP jurisdiction is based on the availability of the officers to do the job. The only restriction that you have in the jurisdiction that the RCMP cover is that they can only take on so much overtime work in terms of the number of personnel they have. Unlike HRP, which can service 3, 4, maybe even 5 events on the same weekend because they're using off-duty officers to fill those roles. So up until now, unfortunately, the situation around HRP is that they are required under their union contract to service those events using off-duty officers. The benefit of the RCMP jurisdiction is that you can use their officers for free, but they're limited in the amount of events they can service in one summer. And there have been times and occasions when the RCMP have turned down events, for example, because the same ball tournament in Sheet Harbor is being held on the same weekend that this request has come in, and they can only service the one municipal or the one special event that weekend.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I saw Councillor Purdy nodding. Thank you, Elizabeth and Andrew. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, I wanted to acknowledge again the work that our special events crew do. This summer, at some point in time, we're going to be coming out of COVID. And while we're focused on all of the stuff that we have to be focused on from a public health point of view, it's really important that we not miss the mark. There are going to be some events in the city this year and in the province, and we have an opportunity to be ready to put on the kind of events that people expect when they come to Halifax. And so I want to thank Elizabeth and her team for that. Just signal my support for Councillor Cleary's plans to defeat this and come back with the alternative. And more than anything else, I just wanted to note for the record that today, May the 19th, 2021, at a committee of the Halifax Regional Council, Andrew Cox is wearing a tie and the mayor is wearing a sweatshirt. That may not happen again, but I wanted that noted for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Your observations are always interesting. I'm going to hand it over to the clerk for a second. Go ahead, Annie.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to inform the committee that we're having a streaming error at the moment with our live stream. So just wanted folks to be aware that for whatever reason, the meeting is not being live streamed at the moment, but we are still recording. And if the meeting, if the video does not work on YouTube, we will upload it manually after the fact. But just wanted everyone to be aware. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Does that have any legislative ramifications?
No.
Thank you. With no further speakers, I would like to call for the question. All those in favor of the motion on the floor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Nay. Thank you. Councillor Cleary, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to let Annie know, it is streaming. It's a 20, 30-second delay, but things are looking good there right now. So I might need some help with the wording here because the alternative in terms of putting it on there, it's not written in motion form, but it says essentially that the Audit and Finance Standing Committee would recommend Halifax Regional Council to approve an unbudgeted withdrawal from the Community and Events Reserve Q621 in the amount of $13,000 to be allocated to the Regional Special Events Program.
Second.
And that would,
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the second. Now that would top the fund up because right now, if they get the 12,000, then adding this 13 would make it 25. And assuming if the request comes in, it's around 24, 25-ish, then we would have enough to cover off the request for municipal services that we provide and essentially pay ourselves back. So I think we've already talked about it, at least I have. So thank you, colleagues. And I look forward to this happening. I look forward to funding it in that sense. And I just will look to our staff to see if I'm missing anything in the way that alternative is, and if anything needs to be included in the motion beyond what I've asked for.
Through you,
So-
Chair, to the councillor, could I please add in the new motion that in the amount of 13,000 to be allocated to Switch Open Streets event in the Regional Special Events Program. I think it's important that that goes specifically to that event, with the caveat, of course, that municipal services are increasing every year. So there may come a time over the next 5 years that it may fall a little short, but for now, I would say confidently that that extra 13,000 would go a long way in helping them out. So if we could just add Switch Open Streets to that, Madam.
The money be directed to that. That works for me, and that's what I originally meant to say.
I figured it was, and appreciate that you started off by recognizing the clarification might be sought. So Annie, if you could take care of that minor adjustment in the wording and paste the motion back into the chat, I would appreciate it.
And if while that's happening, if I may, Mr. Chair, just so the reason for Ms. Taylor indicating that it may come a time where they don't get enough money, that's because we cap applicants right now for the grants at 25. So that is the max anyone could get under the AO.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Annie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'm looking for a clarification around. So I heard Switch Open Streets, and I'm just a bit confused about where that's supposed to go in the motion. I believe that was supposed to be in the amount of 13,000 to be allocated.
That's correct. To be allocated to Switch Open Streets event, and then in the Regional Special Events Program.
Wonderful. Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you very much. And while you're making that change, Councillor Morse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not quite sure who to direct this question to. So through you to whoever you decide. I'm just curious about the specific amount of $13,000. I'd like to see lots of these events. I think they're fantastic. So are we limiting the number that can be held each year, or will we have to come back if Open Streets could do more events in another year to revise this number?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Which at the moment, they have 2 events, Halifax and Dartmouth. If there was another non-for-profit organization that wished to work with Dalhousie Planning Committee, which is the organization that plans these events, they could apply to our regional events grant program, and we would look at their application and could fund them separately. Just like we would fund, Walk for the Cure for Cancer, that type of thing. There is a cap of 25,000, as Councillor Cleary said, on that particular program. However, we get new applications every year, and there is nothing stopping someone in your district, say, from, you know, coming in a non-for-profit saying, oh, this is a great event, we'd like to hold it here, and applying to us through those means.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. We have the revised motion in the chat. That the Audit and Finance Standing Committee may choose to defeat the staff motion. That the Audit and Finance Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council approve an unbudgeted withdrawal from the Community and Events Reserve Q621 in the amount of $13,000 to be allocated to Switch Open Streets event in the Regional Special Events Program. That is the motion on the floor. I don't see any further speakers. So all in favor of that new motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Affirmative.
All opposed, say nay. Great, thank you very much. That new motion passes, and thank you, Annie, for making that change in the chat. The next item on the agenda is 12.3. Oh, and thank you very much, Elizabeth and Andrew, for attending the meeting today and being willing to answer the questions. We really appreciate that. The next item on the agenda is 12.3, the Grants Committee. There's nothing from there. 12.4, there are no committee member motions. There is an in-camera portion. I'm just wondering if anybody would be interested in moving the in-camera minutes of April 29th, 2021. I see Councillor Hensby
So moved,
waving
Mr.
to
Chairman.
move that.
Minutes of April 29, 21.
Second,
Thank you.
Councillor Cleary.
Councillor Cleary, is there any discussion, and do we need to go in camera in relation to that? Okay, in that case, all in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, say nay. Great, thank you very much. There are no added items, so we're on notices of motion. Not seeing any. Okay, thank you very much. There is no public participation. Anna, you have popped up on the screen.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So I just wanted to let committee members know that there will be public participation space held in standing committees moving forward. We just didn't receive any registration for today's meeting.
Okay, thank you. And as a reminder to the public, you would need to register for any public participation session on 4:30 p.m. on the business day before the meeting happens. And so we have not received anybody who was interested in participating in this. So thank you for that. The date of the next meeting of the Audit and Finance Standing Committee is June 16th, 2021. And with that, I would seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Daigle-Gammon. We stand adjourned. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. You too.